6.5%, was it? Is that what the current odds are of the Stanley Cup?
Well, and if you look at the round-by-round progression, the Stanley Cup favorite is the Vancouver Canucks.
Like, what a time to be alive!
Talking you through every goalie controversy, scoring slump, and draft lottery bust, this is the C4 Podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com. Here they are, the best starting lineup we could afford under the salary cap. Chris, Matt, Anna, and Adam.
Welcome to another episode of the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast. This is Chris at Lightforce, joined virtually by Anna Forsyth at aforsyth03, Matley at Matley_61. Continuing to remain unfit to podcast is Adam Ovenel Carter at AdamFOC. Unlike me, who is making his triumphant return. The whole unfit to podcast, unfit to play, unfit to be fit. It's going to be so fun this off season. Let me tell you. How you two doing?
Well, all right. We're glad you're back, on the ice. We kind of...
On the mic.
Unfit to play was like the best way to describe it because we were just kind of mystery illness. So...
Well, I have a little idea as to what it is and what it isn't. So it's not COVID. It's just the recurring issue that I had in 2018 that got me hospitalized for 2 full weeks separately. For those who keep score, that was 2 canceled trips to Hawaii, which is kind of costly, but ultimately it wasn't as bad this time around. It sucks because it's just going to be an ongoing issue that I have to live with, and them's the breaks. But I'm back. I'm here. The voice of reason has finally returned. Exactly. We're going to be joined by Patrick Johnston a little bit later, BJ at Rising Action. You might know him as the Canucks Insider on pretty much every radio network that might have him on, but he also writes for the Vancouver Province, Vancouver Sun. I actually don't know, he's a province guy in my mind, but I know they're one and the same. He's going to join us a little bit later, tell us a little bit what he's been seeing at camp, his thoughts on the Canucks series against the Wild, all sorts of other fun tidbits, being that PJ's got all the juice.
Yeah, we're really excited to have him because I know we've had PJ on in episodes past, of course. And I think, Chris, you can attest to this. It's been a long time since I think we've had PJ on an episode. Well, so it's
he would have joined when we still had access to the NW studio.
And it was before my time, for sure.
Yeah, and if we rewind even further, there was a time where he actually slid into the co-host seat to record an episode with me because, Matt here decided to go to Japan or something like that.
Right, I do remember that. So, I'm really looking forward to catching up with him and getting his thoughts because, I think over the years, PJ has really taken on the mantle of being the Province and Vancouver Sun's go-to Canucks reporter. And he's really delved into it head on and done a really great job. Very active on social media. He's got his sources as well. So I think it's kind of cool to relight that fire and really sort of catch up with him and really get some of that insight heading into the play-in games.
I have to ask though, is he still just a friend of the show? Or is there a level above friend of the show that PJ might be? Because there's very few that have come back as often as he has, and including, co-host an episode. Do we need to go and...
Well, I mean, I was going to say, we've had so many friends of the show that have joined the podcast for the first time over the hiatus here. We might have to create an elevated tier of friend of the show. Is it good friend of the show, Patrick Johnston?
Intimate friend of the show, in a bubble.
That's a little much.
As you flip the paper and get between the sheets. That's
okay, I didn't say that.
I was play on words. I wasn't implying what you were saying. I was owning that one. That was all me. Okay. PJ's going to love hearing this episode if he actually goes and clicks play. But we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in training camp. We're going to talk a little bit about the series. We're going to talk a little bit about the fact that the Vancouver Canucks did sign Rathbone. That's not, I think, a spoiler alert at this point. Bits and bobs, as we always do. So, hey, you know what? Let's stop bouncing around. Let's go into an abbreviated rewind. The first week of training camp is in the books, and I still can't grasp this concept of a training camp in July. This is the time of year when the prospects are currently doing the grouse grind.
Yeah,
that's true.
So, without giving too much away, I did mention in Discord that I did meet and talk to Bo Horvat with via the Dad Lee, and I did get to talk to Horvat about how he's spending his very first summer in Vancouver. Traditionally, Horvat does go back out east to Ontario, where he's from. So he mentioned how he hasn't been in Vancouver in a July since that prospect camp that he came in, I think, in 2013 and 14. So he's loving the weather and stuff like that, and he's really enjoying it. So it was pretty cool to actually talk non-hockey for a while, but you got to be in Discord to get more of the other juicy details.
Very brief off the rails, but you know what I thought about today is that it's going to be so hot wearing a jersey once the games start.
No, I'm not going to put a jersey on. It's way too hot. Like I got fans running. I don't know if it's coming through the podcast. Well, I wouldn't even wear a jersey. Like I'm putting a shirt on out of respect to the two of you, and PJ will be joining us.
We thank you. We thank you for that.
I mean, Matt, on the other hand, who's been flashing his guns, I'd be surprised if he's actually got one on.
Do they have Canucks tank tops? Do they call those jersey tank tops jank tops?
I don't know if they're called jank tops, but I bet you they do sell something. A sleeveless version of something.
Look, if the NHL is marketing itself on a return to play in July and August, they would be very wise to start creating what we would call, trademark now, jank tops for fans.
Jank tops. Heard it here in the C4 podcast first. Back on the rails. I can't believe I am pulling Matt, of all people, back on the rails here. Who's actually impressed you in this first week at camp, outside of Bo Horvat tearing into Jake Virtanen and the three of us giving that a thumbs up?
Okay, so let's lead the discussion, and I'll defer to Anna for her thoughts on this one as well. But I'll lead the discussion by saying Zach McEwen has clearly stood out as one of the better players throughout the first week of training camp.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think we were pretty much set on him as, part of the main group. He's an NHL player, like not part of that Black Aces group. Like he is 100% like on the main set, on the main roster. But like he is really pushing all these people. Like he's saying, put me on. That like when it comes to game one, like I need to be on the ice. Like don't think about sitting me. I'm ready. So, very impressive from the young player.
And on Sunday's scrimmage, I mean, you saw it there. He got an opportunity with Gaudette and Roussel. He set up a goal, scored off a goal off a great pass from Elias Pettersson. Literally, in my mind, kicking down the proverbial door and making it very difficult for Travis Green to not give him a spot going in. I mean, if you're making your game one lineup right now, it's very hard to say Zach McEwen wouldn't be on that lineup.
Well, at the cost of, I would suggest, Jake Virtanen.
Right, and if we're talking about players who have underperformed or unimpressed through the first week, I think it would be pretty plain to say we could go around if you like, but I think most of us would seem to agree that Jake Virtanen has stood out for all the wrong reasons throughout the first week of camp.
So I don't disagree. I mean, I think McEwen has acquitted himself very well. And if you were to consider this a training camp going into a regular season, this is a kid who's giving himself a job, forcing the team to make tough decisions in that regard. Because this is a play-in, while I feel McEwen has taken Jake's spot, there's a part of me that's wondering, like, couldn't we find a way to have both Zach and Jake in the lineup and maybe toss an Eriksson?
So, although I think Louis acquitted himself pretty well.
I know, and that's the contract sort of part talking. Like I guess I sort of looking at this is we have to consider this series against the Wild playoff, and it's playoff hockey. Does Louis hurt you?
So here's the thing that I'll say on Louis Eriksson. Of course, you can tie the contract to the player. You don't have to beat me over the head a couple times to get me to say that Louis Eriksson has been very not earning that contract. But let's put it this way. Louis Eriksson has played on the penalty kill before. He's getting a little bit of a look on the penalty kill right now. And, having Eriksson in that, fourth line kind of role does give you that extra option on the penalty kill. Jake Virtanen and Zach McEwen, I don't think have ever played penalty kill once for the Vancouver Canucks this season. So, I think just by virtue of that, you're probably going to see Louis Eriksson in the game one lineup.
Yeah, and talk about tough decisions. Jake seems to be kind of taking that the wrong way, you know. They're, you know, forcing the Canucks into defending him when he was like out at a nightclub. Not saying, we've discussed this previously, like he didn't do a huge amount wrong, but it's not good optics. And then you just want to see him make headlines the right way coming into camp, you know. Jake, despite what like concerns we might have about his off ice behavior, his on ice is like top notch, and he hasn't really done that.
And that's the thing. Like, you think about this, and again, I mean, we're probably getting more into the Jake Virtanen and off the ice discussion than we'd want to, but he put a lens on himself through his own actions, and now everything is being looked at on ice under a very fine microscope. So, you know, considering the fact that McEwen is playing so well, I have difficulty looking at Jake as being completely out of the lineup. I think there is an opportunity because I do believe what Jake brings is helpful in playoff hockey. But yeah, now, you know, the more I think about it, you do need someone like an Eriksson who's safe. You know, what do? You throw him out there for penalty kill. You throw him out there for the veteran leadership to maybe, you know, slow the game down if need be, and to get all those empty net goals.
Yeah, I would just say that I'm not going to start defending Louis Eriksson here, but there's no way that he garners the hate he does in this market if, like, his contract wasn't so huge. Two, his play didn't take a nosedive because he was actually pretty strong before that contract got given out, and then he was overpaid and it took a nosedive. So we do, you know, he's here, so you do have to take a look at him from the perspective of, yeah, does he help the Canucks or hurt them? Just plain and simple, answer that question.
I think he's probably a little bit of a mixed bag. I don't think Louis Eriksson's going to fill the other team's net with pucks, but I think at the same time, he's probably doing an admirable job of keeping pucks out of our net. I don't want to dwell too much on Louis Eriksson, but I will say I think the only reason we're talking about Louis Eriksson in the Game 1 lineup is because right now we haven't seen too much of Brandon Sutter throughout training camp. And, you know, Brandon Sutter is a guy who is a very clear and very good penalty killer. I think if Brandon Sutter is healthy come Game 1, it's probably going to be Louis Eriksson and one of either Zach McEwen or Jake Virtanen in the press box.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And you make a good point about Sutter, that we're not 100% sure on how game ready he is. So that remains to be seen.
Game ready, Ferland is suggesting he is game ready.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. You know, I think what we saw from Michael Ferland through the 50 minutes of play in the scrimmage on Sunday, and again, I'm acknowledging I only followed along Brendan Batchelor's play-by-play call and saw some highlights, but Ferland looked like he was kind of there attitude-wise, but I think he's still physically trying to catch up to the game. This is a guy who's entering a training camp, having not played hockey in, 6 or 7 months at this point. It's a long time for a guy to be removed from a NHL level of play. I have my doubts at this point that he's going to be able to get up to speed by the time August 2nd rolls around. I would love for him to get up to speed and actually be an X factor in the playoffs, but I think I've got my reservations about playing him over the likes of, again, players we've talked about, McEwen, Virtanen, Eriksson, and Brendan Sutter.
I understand that for sure. I will say that he hasn't had as much time, like he hasn't been with the main group since the start of camp. So he's obviously a step behind. So yeah, possibly he won't make it, but he's doing all the right things to prepare himself. And I do trust that the Canucks will not put him out there unless they're 100% sure. I mean, just look at Manny Malhotra. They let one of their favorite players, most trusted players, go because they didn't think he was safe enough on the ice. So, yeah.
I don't know how you guys...
If he's on the ice, he's ready.
I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I kind of am approaching Michael Ferland, and this is me operating as though he's going to be 100%, but I kind of look at him as he's going to be a break glass and in case of emergency type of player. You know, that being if the Canucks are down 1-0 or 2-0 in the series. I think you're really not considering Michael Furlan until you absolutely have to, and you need something to sort of shake up the tone of the series.
So I'm going to actually ask you a question there. Is break glass in case of emergency falling behind the Wild 1-0?
Probably not 1-0, but I think 2-0 is probably the more appropriate sort of number, which would really force Travis Green's hand. Because again, you're down 2-0 in a series that's a best of 5. So I think at that point you're really looking for some sort of spark, and I think Michael Furlan, again, at 100% health, could potentially provide the spark that you need to get a team going.
The other note I just wanted to share in case people had missed it, Bo Horvat had commented that he had some minor bumps and bruises, some injuries that have sorted themselves out during the break. So he is healthy again. If his play sort of prior to the stoppage was being held back by injury, I can't imagine how his play will be into sort of this playoff hockey. Though that said, if it's a long run, and we're talking about, a Stanley Cup that's going to be potentially awarded in, October? Like end of September, October? I mean, that is a long, long run. So health is important. Blue line, Jordy Ben.
Can we just go back to Bo Horvat for 1 second here?
Sure.
Without getting into too much of it, a lot of people are saying, players like Brock Besser are going to be their sort of sexy breakout sort of nominee for, a performance in the postseason. I think we're sleeping on Bo Horvat a little bit in terms of how well he can play in the playoffs. This is a guy who has said several times really on record that he loves playing playoff hockey. He, going back to the OHL when he was playing for the London Knights, scoring the game-winning goal in Game 7 with like a fraction of a second left. Like, this dude lives and breathes for playoff hockey. Don't sleep on Bo Horvat, I think, really making an impact on the series. I think despite the numbers this year, I think this is a guy who is built for the playoffs, and I think he's going to make some noise.
Oh, yeah, 100%. But he's a quiet leader. That's like the kind of guy he is. He's the kind of guy you underestimate, and he's not a showy player at all. But I think we saw from the amount of responsibility on and off the ice that he took on in his sort of trial run captaincy season last season, like, he can handle it. He can handle the pressure for sure.
Sorry, Chris, you wanted to talk about the blue line.
Yeah, the blue line. So I was mentioning, like, Jordy Ben is back in Dallas waiting, and I don't know, has the birth of his child happened yet?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything yet on that either. I know they were expecting the birth, but I haven't seen anything suggesting the birth has actually transpired yet.
Sure. Now, the fact that we're talking about Jordy Ben not being here isn't a sign of the Vancouver Canucks blue line being in a world of hurt. That's an area they do have some depth, but it has elevated the likes of a Fantenberg, for instance, into sort of the Jordy Ben spot. Is this where maybe Chatfield finds a way in, or Juolevi, who actually hasn't been that bad in all things considered?
No, for sure he hasn't. I think he's probably been a pleasant surprise as to his level, but he's not someone the Canucks want to depend on, even as a third pairing defenseman. I don't think that any of the Black Aces get in as a first port of call. I think they will go with Fantenberg. I think he might have been playing slightly better, not that there's much in it, but I think it maybe just makes the decision for the Canucks
easier.
Yeah.
Further to Anna's point, I think as well, the fact that Ben is in Dallas and Fantenberg is here leads me to believe that bottom pairing will be Fantenberg and Stetcher, at least to open the series. To your guys' points about Chatfield sort of acquitting himself well, I think Chatfield has had a really good camp, given he is probably the next best natural right defenseman in the lineup. But again, like Anna mentioned, I'm probably not rushing out to put him into my lineup unless there was an injury. I feel better about the prospect of putting Jalen Chatfield out there if you have to, but I don't think he's an upgrade over what we currently have in terms of our top 7 defensemen.
Well,
yeah, I agree.
When we talk about top 7, sure, but right now we're looking at 6 because arguably
with Ben out of the equation.
I'm
putting Ben into the top 7 here.
Actually, and a little bit of an aside here. How will that work? Like, I understand that there has been like an exemption for NHL players, But when he returns,
he's got to isolate.
Yeah, I was going to say, they're not going to go and stick him into the bubble. Like, there will be...
And, I think the fact that they have, sort of, quote-unquote, allowed Jordy Ben to go back to Dallas really signifies both to Ben and to the coaching staff that it's likely going to be Fantenberg ahead of Ben here. But I think at that point, Ben will be able to return in time by the time players are off in Edmonton. So he should be, ready to go by August 2nd, assuming everything goes off without a hitch.
Ready in so much as being able to come out of isolation. He's at best going to be able to train on his own, and obviously his fitness won't be the same as if he had gone through this camp as other players have. And we should point out to our listeners here, the three of us are not saying the Canucks should have said no to Ben going for the birth of a child. That's priority number one here. It's just, unfortunately, the circumstances mean a little bit more than, let's say, if that birth was happening in Canada as opposed to US and all that jazz because of the pandemic.
Yeah, but Bo literally got his kid out 3 weeks early so he could start training camp on time. So plan better, Jordy.
Bo totally did that. Well, okay. I mean, I think we've talked about this previous episodes. Hockey players are all about planning and structure. I'm going to guess there are going to be a ton of potential births throughout the league where tough decisions are going to be made. So, because this is the month, so's next.
Well, you know what? It's going to be interesting because, you guys mentioned how October is going to roll around and then the season's going to be delayed, and then it's throwing the whole baby-making period for NHL players out of sync as a result.
Yeah. Anywho, why don't we take ourselves a short break here and see if a friend of the show, or as we've now tried to figure out how to elevate friend of the show, Patrick Johnston, can join us.
Take hitting out of the game. You can't hit anymore, so don't do it.
The unsportsmanlike conduct, I want to get an explanation on that.
No kidding.
Because how do you get suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct?
Plus interference. There's no interference there. He had the puck.
Now, Madison never ever did that before. Now, why did he do it? And that because he was mad.
Well, your early favorite for the Calder Trophy, that's for sure. Elias Pettersson, you might even say your early favorite for the Hart Trophy.
Just to get back to your question, Elias is going to play plenty. He's going to get a lot of power play time. And yeah, I'm concerned about our offense. We lost 200-point players, and we've got to find a way to score.
So joining us now is super friend of the show, or whatever the heck we determine that actual tier to be. Patrick Johnston at Rising Action. You know him on Twitter. You know him at the Vancouver Province, Vancouver Sun, Canucks Insider on all the radio networks, and just an all-around good guy.
Oh, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, we were talking before he joined us because, we have lots of friends of the show, but you're a level above because, I mean, you used to join us all the time before we were, as awesome as we were. And then you also helped record an episode. I remember going out to 200 Granville and in the Province Closet or whatever the heck it was. You had
Did we do a show there?
Yeah, you actually did the recording because Matt was in Japan. I came down on a weekend and we recorded in the closet that was set up to do podcasts in.
I vaguely remember this now. Was it the first aid room?
Yeah, it might have been the first aid room. I just remember it was
in the first aid room. My God, two of you
so
in
glamorous.
A closet together, just hammering out a podcast.
The blog wars were real then, man.
Yeah, it was definitely way back. I mean, this is the thing. When you're the longest running Canucks podcast, you've got history and you've got memories, and I'm the only one that keeps track of this stuff.
Well, you can't rely on Matt. Matt doesn't remember anything.
Yeah, week to week, he's trouble.
And
I was watching highlights.
This innocent figure who walked in had no idea what this was.
I was watching highlights
whatever
of
happened
2003
has nothing to do with me.
Minnesota Wild versus Vancouver Canucks. I'm like, oh, I forgot that Trent Klatt played for the team back then. I'm like, I can't even remember stuff from 2003.
Yeah. The as we'll preview a little bit later when we get into the Canucks Wild series, thinking back to that series itself, that was a whole different era. I mean, thankfully, hopefully we won't see a return to 2003 Canucks Wild hockey in, 2020 right now? Such a blur.
Yeah. 2020. I don't even know. Is it?
Yeah. Yes, I think so.
Is the year ever going to end? I don't think it will.
No. But let's talk a little bit about the fact that the Vancouver Canucks are not forcing the team to run up the gross grind as they would aptly do with the prospects in July. No, they're actually on ice with the training camp. So we thought, you swinging through, you're there-ish, right? I mean, I don't know how they're doing the whole, social distancing. Like, do you get to have your own individual suite? Like, is that how they're separating?
I was joking before we started that we just get our own sections, like you each have to stay in our little area. But yeah, I mean, there's basically 2 people to a row. There's like 10 seats between you. And then it's like, I don't know, 3. There's like maybe 4 of us in a section, like 5 rows apart. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's pretty distance. I mean, they've set up a kind of a workspace for us out on one of the concourses. Yeah. And we sort of sit at like far ends of the table, to keep things safe. So it's weird because we're just all the interviews are done with Zoom and so it's different. I mean, it is what it is.
So I got a question just because you're sort of peeling back the curtain a little bit here. So the meetings obviously take place on Zoom. Where are you physically when the meetings happen usually?
Like when we do the interviews?
Yeah. Are you guys just like back at the office or are you like also in the arena, just in a different room?
Yeah. So I'm setting up. They've set up a little, I guess you've seen the clips. If you've seen the clips, they're sitting, they've set up a little basically chair that, Ben Brown leans in and pulls it in, cleans it down, and puts in a new chair. That's when you see Ben, who's the main Canucks. I guess he's the senior director of PR communications. Anyway,
yeah.
But Ben's the PR guy that's in the bubble, so Ben does that, and I believe he had to set the stage up himself. And yeah, there's a little video camera. Basically, they're looking at a computer, and then the way the Canucks have chosen to do it is that we're all just blank screens to them, like they see our name, but they actually have turned our video off.
Which you can't like make faces.
They saw you guys enough throughout the season. They don't need to see your faces.
Yeah, they need a break probably.
Yeah. Although Antoine Rousseau, when he sat down, was quite funny because he's obviously quite, he actually really enjoys media and talking to us. And he sort of reached in and tapped on the screen and. It was fun. So anyway, so we're sitting upstairs. You can do it from home, and people are doing it from home because there's not a huge reason to be at the rink. I haven't been there every day, but it's a weird one. It is.
You guys get temperature checks too, right? Before you even get into the arena.
Yeah,
this must be such a weird time for you as as a sports reporter. Like you've probably sort of seen everything, or at least you thought you've seen everything before all this happened. And next thing you know, the pandemic comes, and you're getting temperature checks. You're having media availability over Zoom. It's a weird time to be a sports reporter, I think, these days.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't gone too far afield. I've done a little rugby. I've done a little Women's World Cup. I've done hockey here. Mm-hmm. I mean, Ed Willis, he'd be the guy because he's done the Olympics. And, so he's been, he was in Sochi. He had that experience. So, it's definitely not conventional. You kind of make the best of it. I mean, I think one of the things that people maybe don't realize is because they're so used to seeing like interviews happening on TV, right? So the scrum is happening. There's all the cameras and everything. And, those of us who've been in the room know that there's lots of other conversations happening that aren't on camera. Mm-hmm. And for the writers, that's actually where we have our best stuff. You can sidle up to Antoine Roussel or Troy Stetcher or Tanner Pearson or, Bo. I mean, Bo obviously gets a lot out of him, but you can wait till the end of the scrum, ask him a couple questions. PD's the same way. Those Canucks on the whole, I think, are a pretty good team in terms of their willingness. I mean, they deal with a lot of media, of course, but on the whole, those players are pretty good about it. They're pretty willing to have a chit chat, and if they don't want it, they know the drill, right? It's not like they hang out in that room. Their hangout space is somewhere else, so it's kind of up to them. If they don't get out of there fast enough, they know how it's going to play out.
Right. Has it been pretty well run? Has there been any awkward moments or like someone doing the wrong thing or?
No. I mean, honestly, I don't know if there's much wrong you can do. I mean,
take your mask off and not put it back on.
Yeah, but I mean, it's funny,
Give people hugs.
Realistically, yeah. I mean, I think people have been good about it. It's I mean, we kind of joke because the Canucks have actually set it up that you're supposed to go in one through one entry and then out through another. And I think each of us have kind of forgotten which way to go and realize, it's a bit like when you're in the grocery store, you'll look down all of a sudden realize
the arrow's the wrong way.
And, but I mean, thankfully, there's only a handful of us, and I think we're getting our temperature. I mean, that's been the funny thing. Every day I've been kind of excited to find out what my temperature is because I'm fine. And I rode my bike actually on Saturday. I looked at, I was like, you know what, might as well. So I hopped on my bike, and it was about a 45-minute ride. And I was like, I wonder what this is going to mean for my temperature. And I actually had the lowest temperature I've had all week. So,
wow.
I don't know.
So the trick is get the core temperature higher so that when you hit the cool down, it's a bigger low.
Or something. Yeah. Maybe that's it. Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk a little bit about training camp. So before you joined us, we were sort of talking about what we've seen from the really cheap seats, which actually isn't in the building at all. And the player that we said that has impressed us the most is Zach McEwen. Now, again, really, really cheap seats. But are we on the right track here, or is there maybe someone else that we've overlooked?
It's tough to say. I mean, every training camp, there's a good story, right? And there's always a guy that impresses. It's sort of a relative question. Zach McEwen's come a long way. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, when he first skated in the NHL last season, you sort of, big dude, can skate pretty well. Not sure the rest is there. And even his sort of early recalls, because I don't know if you remember, but he was just on this like endless back and forth series of recalls and demotions. And it kind of got to the point where it was a bit of a running joke between him and me, because it would always seem that I would end up walking into the room just as he'd come off the ice, and I'd look at him, he'd look at me and grin. I said, "Oh, you're back. How's it going this time?" And I'd ask him to rate his travel, and I think it was only the most recent one that was actually really bad. But he's come a long way. I asked him a little bit about it on Saturday, just sort of whether he knows how he's made this happen. Mm-hmm. And he's a pretty smart guy. And, obviously the backstory, I think, is well known. He was an undersized guy, had this incredible growth spurt at basically age 18, and all of a sudden became this big dude, and has spent the better part of the last, 24? Last 6 years translating those skills into the skills that he had into a big man's frame. And the biggest thing he said he recognized very early on was that his coaches really do know a lot more than him, mm-hmm. and that any advice they give him, he should take it on board. And, I said this more than once in more than one place, but there are several kinds of players. There are the players who can do things really well and understand why they do them really well. There's the players who do things really well but don't understand why. They just don't know that. They don't know why they do it. There's the players who know they can't do it, are aware of what they can't do, and know why they can't do it. And then there's the rest of us who know we can't do it and know why we can't do it. But I think McEwen's a guy that kind of straddles that first category and that third category. He's a guy that he's aware of his weaknesses, and he's aware of how he might be able to fix them. And, in the end, he's come a long way, and he's made it work. He's been a very, 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 very good player because of it. So yeah, in relative terms, yeah, he's been great. I think on the whole, been a pretty good camp. Everyone's working really hard, and there's a few exceptions. I think probably talk about one of them, I'm sure, but on the whole, it's tough to say. I mean, without games, everyone's trying hard, everyone's skating hard. I mean, Broken Rafferty did great in the mountain climbers the other day. I don't know what that means, right?
Yeah, well, let's get right into it there. Let's not beat around the bush. Jake, is it as bad as it looks? Is it a moment for concern, or is it just, he's had a bad couple days?
It's entirely possible he's had a bad couple of days. I mean, he's a player. You've seen the talent. I mean, he scored 18 goals this year. He actually got some power play time. That's been a good thing. There's lots about his game, I think, that you can miss that are problems. And, he's not an instinctual along the boards player. I think a lot of it goes back to who he was as a junior. He was the bigger kid. And go look at his highlight reels from when he played for the Hitmen. This is a kid that scored his goals because he was all alone, because he bossed his way to the middle of the ice. He was a great skater. He was outworking these young, defensemen who are younger than him, smaller than him. We're never going to play in the NHL. He has the NHL skill set. And, I think we all agree it was in the NHL too soon. I think there was stuff that he needed to work on that he would have benefited from. And, some of it, this is just who he is. So, I think this is the player we're going to see. He's got some skills. He's got some deficiencies. He's going to be an NHL player, I think, for a long time because he scores well enough. But there are a lot of players who scored well enough who weren't able to make careers because they they didn't realize really when they really needed to start digging in that everything was starting to move past them and that there were people coming up behind them that were maybe a better fit, shall we say. So, we'll see. I mean, I certainly think that he's not a lock to make that lineup. That's for sure. There's a lot of options there. I mean, McEwen's one. There's not a lot of spots if you look the way that lineup pencils itself in. Whether you're going to get Brandon Sutter in there, whether you're going to get Louis Eriksson in there, whether you're going to get Michael Furlan, as opposed as let's be honest. Sunday, he's got a long way to go. Sunday night, he skated on an AHL line, right? He skated with Bailey and Grauback. Both those guys played in the NHL this year, but those guys are Utica Comets. And then there's Jake, and there's sort of, it depends on how you want to shake things out because, Louis and Sutter both kill penalties, right? You're going to have at least one of those guys in the lineup. And, there's not a lot of space. There's a right winger on the fourth line, right winger on the third line, and we'll see how things play out.
So I guess sort of on that note, do you get any indication that this training camp is similar to what we would normally see at, the beginning of a season? Or is this more of a conditioning camp where the lineup itself is pretty much structured and the opportunity for someone to play themselves into a spot is mitigated because of the high risk possibility where, they could have 3 games and that's it?
Right. I think it's both, honestly. I mean, there is the conditioning element, right? Like these guys had all been off. I mean, they skated in June for, they got on the ice. They were getting their physical routines back, but there's no margin for error. There's not the regular preseason. You get 8 games, and an NHL veteran is going to get 3 or 4 of those games, right? Like he's going to have some game time. But even then, we know that October is kind of almost an extension of preseason in terms of players finding their groove, and some of them thrive and some of them don't. And, by 2/3 of the way through the season, we're seeing the player that we should see. Yeah. So you don't have that margin for error here. You do have, it is a bit old school in that there's essentially just 2 weeks of guys just working and getting in sort of hockey shape again and getting used to all that. Mm-hmm. I do think at the end of the day, the sort of need to get things just right. And, we know that the Canucks will be as prepared as possible to face the Wild. We know the Wild will be as prepared as possible to face the Canucks.
Yeah.
The fine markers here now, I think, are going to come down to things like not just how they look in practice, but, teams are tracking so much data internally, off practices now. Those guys are all wearing catapults, GPS units, so they know how fast they're going. They know what their baselines are. They know how far above or below they're sort of above the expected performance. So it's going to come down to some really fine comb decisions, I think, in terms of how these lineups get set. And yeah, to answer your question, Chris, it's just, I think at the end of the day, it's just a bit of everything.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to take a very quick break here. You are listening to the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast on the Full Press Coverage Network, as well as CanucksHockeyBlog.com.
He liked to say the F word.
Oh, then get the here then. Okay, see ya.
Is going to have the F word on it.
I wish I could give you an explanation about it. I can't. You, out of here.
You said the F word, Dad.
You called me the F word.
With training camp out of the way, let's talk a little about the fact the Vancouver Canucks will be facing off against the Minnesota Wild, presuming still in Edmonton, because who knows what's going on with the, was it the Rogers Center, is it called?
Place.
Rogers Place. Rogers has too many stadiums. I can't keep track.
This is Ed Willis. This is an Ed Willis thing. He's just waiting for the Rogers experience. That's what he thinks will be the next one, called the Rogers
experience.
Speaking of Rogers experience, maybe the players could swim to the rink at this point. Yeah.
Ooh, there you go.
Yeah, if you for some reason did not hear this, big storm go through Alberta. I mean, summer storms in Alberta are nuts. They can go anywhere from like torrential rain, Noah's got his ark out, to like hail, crazy weather, tornadoes, snow. Like, if weather can occur, Alberta gets it. And anyhow, big storm goes through Edmonton, gets a little too much water, and yeah, it floods the building. Anywho, let's presume it's still going to actually take place there. Vancouver Canucks are going to be taking on the Minnesota Wild. What do you think we should expect from that series? I know it's a little hard to tell because it's been so long since we've seen meaningful hockey, let alone, I can't remember the last time the Vancouver Canucks played the Minnesota Wild.
I think it was the game I was at. Or no, it was a home game.
February 22nd.
Yeah, that was the home game, right?
It was the first Toffoli game, I think, once they had acquired him.
I need to look at this again because I'm pretty sure February 19th. Yes.
Oh, damn. It's close enough.
They're an eminently forgettable hockey team, I think is a good way to characterize them.
It was a shootout. Yeah. Okay.
Minnesota won in the shootout. That was the game where Fiala sniped one like first minute into the game past Markstrom, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Right. Okay, yeah. Anyway, I mean, here's the thing. Minnesota, they're a team that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, like there's not a whole lot going for those guys. That said, they did win more than they lost. I think if you look at the numbers, I mean, they've also had some good goaltending this year. I mean, Alex Stalock was a great story, took the job from Devin Dubnyk, who then got hurt and then was away for ages. I mean, the Canucks should win. They have better top-end talent. But I was there for a game in early February when it was the one game without Pettersson this year. And the Canucks were terrible. Completely outplayed. And just didn't have. I mean, it was literally, to me, the reason why Pettersson's the MVP. It was that game. You just saw how good he was, what his performance, or what a difference he made to that lineup without having him there. And so I mean, he's healthy and he's fine. He should be back. But it was just such a reminder to me of the challenges in terms of depth that the Canucks still have. And obviously, that game that I was at, that game in Minnesota, was without Tyler Toffoli. Adding Tyler Toffoli makes a big difference to this lineup. It makes it deeper. Brock Besser, who I'm still not sure he really is the best fit to play with Horvat and Pearson, but he is there. Puts them on it gives you another line, another threat. It fills a hole that the Canucks have been struggling to fill for quite a while, especially since Michael Ferland wasn't able to play that right wing on the Horvat line. It is, as someone once in the game who has a lot of smart things to say, once told me, you want to fill from you fill from the top to push players down the lineup. You don't bump players up the lineup. And so, when you add a guy like Toffoli, that pushes Brock Besser down the lineup, which then pushes Louis Eriksson or Brandon Sutter or Jake Virtanen down the lineup. And those are guys that, they shouldn't be playing in your top two lines, but you're all right with them playing as a depth forward. And so if the Canucks are fully healthy, there's every reason to think they're the better team.
So if I heard you correctly, Brock Besser should not be playing on the top two lines as he is a depth forward. Got it.
But you get my point, right?
I do.
Yeah, it's because at the end of the day, you don't want guys that should be third or fourth liners playing on your second line. You want guys that should be first liners, like Brock Besser is, playing on your second line, because that's the lesson from, without banging the drum too often, that's the lesson from 2011, right? They traded for Higgins, they traded for Lapierre partly because Manuel Holter was hurt, but because they needed more bits on the team, and all of a sudden Rafi Torres became a fourth liner, and Jannik Hansen was playing on the fourth line. It just made that team so much more deep, and made those impactful moments where your stars are off the ice, so much more in their favor. And that's, again, the team still has issues defensively, and that's a story for another day, I think. But offensively, this is a team that's the Canucks are better than the Wild.
I like how PJ prefaced his whole Minnesota Wild preamble with, they won more games than they lost. That was the first thing that he led with. It's like, well, they won more games than they lost.
It doesn't make any sense because they just don't seem that good, and they're not really that good.
Okay, so this was going to be my question. Like, what has made the Wild a successful team? Has it been the structure? Has it been the depth of their defense? Because I think that's been getting the most attention as to why the Minnesota Wild are even in this play-in series.
Well, they had a bit of puck. They had a bit of puck luck early in the year. That's some of the story. They're not an amazing defensive team. They actually gave up more goals than the Canucks did this year. But they kept themselves afloat in a division that I think we thought was going to be better. But because the Jets' defense kind of fell apart, because the Stars continue to have this issue with scoring goals, because the Predators were kind of a bit lost at sea, they kept themselves in the hunt. They weren't a playoff team. They weren't good enough to be a playoff team. And so that's the thing, right? They ended up finishing sixth in their division, but they're in the play-in round, which is all that matters. And, here they are. They got as many points as the Canucks did, but of course we know all about the Canucks in their division and how sort of weak that division was for most of the year. So more than likely, I think the Canucks were probably going to make the playoffs. But the truth is that the Wild just kind of, they took their opportunities, especially early on, and then, towards the end of the season there, turned the corner again. They managed to make things work and maybe got a few bounces. And this is Gary Bettman's NHL, right? In many ways, having the play-in round is sort of the Gary dream, because it kind of lets him say, well, look how many of our teams are competitive. And it's like, well,
and that actually goes back to the press release from the NHL that said teams that are playing are considered to have made the postseason. I know that was structured around bonuses and what have you.
Yeah.
But the league is really wanting to trumpet, like, this is postseason hockey. Yeah. Without realizing that you suddenly have a Vancouver Canucks team that's like, oh, so we don't have a pick anymore, yay or nay.
Well, it's a bit like the old Smythe division, right, guys? Like when 16 to 21 teams made the NHL. It was absurd, and it's a little bit of the same kind of thing here.
Yeah, I wonder, like, Minnesota, we said they play boring style of hockey. It's pretty contained, but
that's a good word. I like that. I might steal that. They play contained hockey.
It's yours, right? But it's just like it's a little bit more stable than the Canucks. But am I just trying to be a bit more optimistic here? Is there something to be said for the fact that the Canucks had to work really hard to get where they are, and especially on the back end, because they give up so many more opportunities, Markstrom worked really hard to keep them there. Is that some glimmer of hope, or am I stretching there?
I get what you're saying. at the same time, you could also make the same argument for the Jets, or not for the Jets, for the Wild, though, right? I mean, this is again a team that did what it needed to, and kind of scrap their way to their position. It's a tough one. I get what you're saying. Certainly, I think the Canucks would tell you that they believe in what they've been doing. I think the fact that they scored all those goals, especially early in the year, did make a big difference to their confidence, and essentially took them to a place mentally that they've been struggling to find. I mean, you still have to have the talent and the skill, right? It's not just about self-belief. But we know that Hughes and Pettersson have changed a lot of the story here in terms of offering hope, a way forward. And I think the fact that Hughes was such a performer right off the bat, over and above anything we could have expected, it made a big difference. And again, it is a little bit of that, being able to push players down the lineup. And having Quinn Hughes means, as your sort of primary offensive defenseman, means that you're not having to play Alex Edler 25 minutes a night, which was happening. Don't forget that he was being ground into the earth, and he's in his 30s. He was never a quick defenseman to begin with. But if you can start picking your spots a little bit with him, you optimize yourself a bit better. And yeah, I mean, it's a little bit. I know the will aspect, I think, does have something to do with it, but at the end of the day, you can't say that about the Canucks and then ignore the fact that Minnesota really looked to be sort of they'd won a bunch of games to close the season. That to me is the thing at the end of the day. Both these teams had a very interesting story this year, even if it wasn't necessarily always a successful story.
On the topic of stories, though, we're going to see something we've never seen with the return of these two teams to the ice. You have the historic rival of the Minnesota Wild and the Vancouver Canucks, although I'm not entirely sure if Vancouver still qualifies as the rival with Winnipeg now, but you have Brock Besser playing his hometown team.
Yeah.
Outside of the fact that we're probably jonesing for some hockey, do you think we're going to see some entertaining hockey from these two teams?
I think so. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of how the Canucks are built, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the truth of the matter is that, the Canucks' style is sort of built on the assumption that they're going to get the saves in their own end. They're going to be able to break the puck out, and they're going to go and they're going to, they may bleed a lot at the back, but they're going to make you bleed even more at your end. And that's the only way they know how to play. That's the way this team's built to play. And, obviously it leaves you open to a lot of trouble. I mean, Minnesota did a very good job defending in their own end this year. They're very good at protecting the slot. And that, any team that's good at defending the slot generally is tough to play against. And it generally gives you a chance to win every single night if you're just doing enough to stop the other team. At the end of the day, that's going to be the Canucks' challenge is whether they're able to create enough of a mess in the middle. A guy like Tyler Toffoli does make a difference in that way. I mean, that is the way he plays. You can see why Darryl Sutter was such a fan of his. This is a guy who likes to play on top of the crease. He's got great hands. He puts, it's kind of old school. Put your stick on the ice and, the puck will come to it. That to me that's going to be what the story is entirely about, how what the Canucks are able or not able to do in the the home plate area, as we call it, between the face-off dots and down to the goal line.
I wanted to set aside some time, PJ, just to talk about this one, and you mentioned him just now, so it's a nice little segue, but you mentioned Tyler Toffoli. Saw in a little bit of your ramblings over the weekend as well that there's a lot of talk about the Canucks wanting to retain the services of Toffoli, and I understandably so, right, given the price that they paid for him. But I don't think, and I think you alluded to this in your writing, is that it's probably not at least considered a slam dunk at this point. You mentioned Toffoli still has a lot of ties to the Los Angeles area. His wife has a job in Los Angeles as well. I don't know if it just simply comes down to money when it comes to trying to retain the services of Tyler Toffoli.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. If Elliot Friedman brought this up, and I, made a similar comment on Twitter, and you get these people, Friedman doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm like, first of all, I'm taking my glasses off for those who are, Elliot Friedman knows what he's talking about. At the end of the day, it's just simple logic. The guy has a home there. Living in LA is awesome. His wife works for the Dodgers. They've got a home. They got a life there. He's going to get paid wherever he goes. He's already won the Stanley Cup. Like, I think that's the thing that, he's here to win. Like, this isn't a guy who's here to coast. But it's so funny how I think people overestimate, especially I think in players' position like that, they overestimate the calculation that winning plays in all this, especially at a player, in Toffoli's position. I'm sure if he sits back and says, I think the Canucks have a good chance to win the Stanley Cup next 5 years, and he signs a 5-year deal or whatever. Great. I don't think he would deny that, but there's a lot more factors than just that. It's not, there are players who do sign, I'm going there to win the Stanley Cup, okay. But I think most players know how hard that is, and it is something outside of their control. I mean, Tyler Myers would tell you he signed here because he thinks there's a chance to win the Stanley Cup, but he also signed here because he wanted to live here, and he's got a house in Kelowna, and there's lots of connections. I mean, Michael Furland, of all people, literally said that last summer when we were asking him about part of the, why did he choose to sign here? And he made it clear. He said, no, my wife really wanted to live in Vancouver. And I said, so just to be clear, this is as much about family as anything else. And he said, yeah. That should tell you everything, I think, right there. That there's a lot we don't know about Tyler Toffoli.
Right.
Partly because he's only been here a short time. We've barely gotten to know him.
Yeah. We're not even including the fact that like the return to Los Angeles would be pretty alluring for a lot of free agents as well. Like, consider the future that LA has already built with their prospect pipeline. They're picking second. In the NHL draft as well. Like, they're going to get another great piece as well. So if you're Tyler Toffoli, why wouldn't you want to go to a team that has maybe just as equally as bright of a future as the Vancouver Canucks does? So
because you might not win right away. I mean, that is a fair comment at the same time, right? Like that is the truth of the equation. Tyler Myers also didn't sign here last summer because he wanted to join a team that had no hope to win. That most players don't do that. There is a former Vancouver Canuck that you can point to and say might be an example of that, and that's Andrew Castles. Andrew Castles played, like 900 games in the NHL and has 25 career playoff games. Because, well, what does that tell you, right? Like, yeah, he played 1,015 any career regular season games for Montreal, Hartford, Calgary, Vancouver, Columbus, and Washington, and played 21 career playoff games. It just sort of tells you that, like, that there is more to this than just how long your season lasts. That sometimes it's about, you don't want to have it that long. I mean, I don't think Toffoli's that guy, but I think people need to get their head around the fact that it's not this sort of cut and dry, simple, well, why wouldn't he want to stay here? It's like, well.
Right. And not that I'm saying he's cold and calculating, but like, what a good advertisement for his services that he's had in his time in
that too.
Vancouver.
Yeah. Especially in a universe where the cap is flat and you're going to be fighting for every dollar.
Well, that's why we're trading Brock Besser, right?
Oh,
so can we talk about that now? Do you want to talk about that very, very briefly? I mean,
what is else to say? I think we've kind of covered it. I mean, I'll talk on it briefly. I mean, Canucks have cap challenges. Trading Brock Besser to solve your cap challenge is a ridiculous solution. If you're trading Brock Besser because you're trying to find yourself a top end defenseman because you desperately need one, that's a different story. I still don't think that's what you want to do. And Jim Benning, certainly the way he's presented it in public, says you don't find guys like Brock Besser growing on trees. That certainly the rhetorical argument is there. I mean, there has been, his name was discussed last year. There's no denying that. We think we all know that. But at the end of the day, this is a player that makes the Canucks better. And, they like I said, they still need to do work on their back end, but, Besser does well. And, Toffoli, let's be honest, they have to re-sign Toffoli. Otherwise it's a crazy expensive price for a player that, in the end will have played, a couple dozen games, I think, at best at this point.
Taking that sort of Brock Besser signing as a segue into things that you can do to light Canucks Twitter on fire. Nikita's out, Jack's in. So there was a passionate group of people that thought Tryamkin was the answer to all of the Canucks problems on the blue line, which is hard to actually fathom.
Yes.
But then not related to Nikita is the fact that Jack Rathbone was this sudden where like, oh my God, he's totally going to peace out on the Vancouver Canucks. He's going to go for another collegiate year, whether or not that actually happens. And my goodness, the Canucks are going to lose out yet again, even though they don't lose out.
Yeah.
Maybe sort of you can quickly touch on, like, was there ever an opportunity for Tryamkin to find his way into a Canucks jersey prior to the fact that the cap was flat?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to last summer. I mean, I've spoken with Jim Benning many times about this. I've spoken with Todd Diamond many times. I mean, Todd Diamond obviously is representing his clients, trying to say, our player wants to come back to the NHL. But Jim Benning last year, when it first kind of came up, said, yes, absolutely. I would really like to have him back. He was very clear on that. And, I think if we don't all of a sudden stop playing in March, and all the consequences that come from that, I think, I'm not saying it was a slam dunk, but there was a very good chance of it happening this summer. But I mean, I think it could even still have happened, but I think the problem was in many ways, it had to do literally with building your roster for next season. And it was very hard. It was very hard at this point for them to be able to say they could do that. It was clarity because, they do want to move. Let's be clear. They do want to make space. We know that. And those possibilities have been discussed in a lot of ways. So, if Tryamkin had been able to wait till October when the off-season begins and the Canucks could actually start thinking about this stuff a bit more seriously, I think it could still possibly happen. But the truth was he hadn't skated since February. He hadn't played. The guy needs to play. That is a tangible problem. And training camp started last week in Russia. So, his old team was more than willing to have him back. And, that was the thing, is that he basically had to make a calculus. Like, there's unknown. He doesn't know, the NHL wants to play beginning of December.
Yeah.
But you can't leave the guy in the lurch for that long, is essentially.
Well, but he himself couldn't leave himself in the lurch. Like, you don't skate for, you don't play competitive hockey. You're going to lose your juice. And, it's hard enough, everybody's coming back at the same time, but if he just sat out and didn't play, like, he's behind the eight ball. He's already setting himself up to fail. So it was, at the end of the day, it was a clear calculus. They basically said it's more important that you stay on the ice, you stay in game, game form. And at the end of the day, as Todd Diamond basically said to me, we'll try again next summer.
Real quick, Jack Rathbone, was there any doubt, or was he going to walk away?
No, I wasn't convinced. Oh, I don't know about walking away, But I wasn't, I talked to a couple of people. I wasn't convinced. I mean, I didn't talk to Jack himself, so who knows? But, people who think about this stuff. And, I as I said, I mean, I tweeted, I said, I'm not sure it's a lock. The only reason to sign when he did was it burns a year off the contract because he doesn't get paid, right? He doesn't get a signing bonus until next season. So he gets 2 signing bonuses. So he's like literally all he's doing is committing to not going back to potentially play hockey for Harvard in January, which was, there's a chance, they think that maybe they might be able to get back on the ice then. He told his parents he's going to stick with school. I presume that part of his plan is to, take some courses this fall. So that was going to be something one way or another. We'll see what happens with the AHL. I'm giving you guys a scoop. I was talking to someone today who was basically saying, oh yeah, no, they think the AHL could play this year, which seems crazy to me, but they know more than I do. So, he may get some ice time starting in December. There is an outside chance that he actually does push for a Canucks roster spot next season. And if he does, then great gamble by him because, making the NHL club is a lot more than you make playing in the American Hockey League. And he'll be that much closer to signing his next contract. The way it was kind of sort of put to me, the way to think about it was, what does he gain by signing now? He burns a year, doesn't make any money. If he'd waited till the end of next season, so next, as we've seen in recent years with, like, say, Brogan Rafferty, if he waited till the end of next season, he would get his money right away. The standard practice now for guys coming out of college is basically, I want to be on the NHL roster to close the season because there's a financial impact, obviously, of making an NHL salary for a couple weeks. That almost, that's almost like, sometimes doubling your signing bonus. That makes a difference. And he could have done that, or he could have been a free agent next summer, gone wherever he wanted. But I think, at the end of the day, clearly he lined it all up. The fact that Canucks had been so loyal to him, the fact that they were willing to take him, even though he was not going to go to Harvard right away because he wanted to spend another year with his brother, that meant a lot to him. And, the fact that he knew so many of the Canucks so well. I mean, the Canucks are well stocked in Boston area scouts, even after Judd Brackett left.
Yeah.
And, Judd obviously is a family friend of theirs, but and he coached him when he was younger, and that made a difference. But there were other guys around, and he talked a lot. Chris Higgins was there a lot, and talked to him quite often. And there's there are other scouts in the area, and that that made a difference for him. Clearly, he said it. And, I think it was interesting when you interviewed him. He's a well-spoken kid. Didn't reveal a lot. He's careful, not boring. Not unwilling to talk, but guarded because, he doesn't know us and it's a long way away. And, but he's going to Harvard. He's a smart kid. So, hopefully he's here because I like talking to smart people.
And yet you're on our podcast.
I know. I know. I mean, if Matt weren't here, it'd certainly raise the talent
raise the IQ quotient.
Yeah. Raise the IQ, yeah.
But I'm totally okay with this practice we have of, like, you take our cup, we take your children from the Boston area.
I don't like that trade, I'll be honest. I would rather we have the cup.
I'd rather we have the cup, but, like, petty revenge and all that.
Oh, true that. So, you know what we're going to do is we're going to take one final break here. But before we do, we're going to thank Patrick for joining us at Rising Action on Twitter. You can read all about everything that he writes in the Province Vancouver Sun online. Slide into his DM sometime. Ask him all the sweet secrets. He's just an open book.
They are open. Yeah, they are open there. Absolutely.
Cool. So we're going to take another quick break. Oh, sorry.
I would say provincesports.com. Check it out.
Provincesports.com. I understand there's a guy that writes... his name's Patrick, something like that. But we'll take a final break here. The C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast is heard on Full Press Coverage and CanucksHockeyBlog.com.
Take care, guys.
It's always nice to get PJ onto the podcast. Always well spoken, comes with a wealth of information, even brings us the scoops. Like, that was kind of impressive. I still don't quite understand the function of the AHL returning to action. I mean, not to suggest that they don't. It's just I was under the impression that league is very much a gate-driven league, and logistically, just playing for the sake of playing seems like an expensive venture.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, it would help us out a lot if we have a club developing our players. But yeah, it's just local teams, like owned by local communities a lot of the time. So yeah, you struggle to see how that would work.
Maybe they'll sell cardboard cutouts to fans where they can get a cardboard cutout. You see how they're doing that for the Seattle Mariners?
I was going to say, like Korean baseball has been doing that, except that
the
one
Mariners
team that was
are doing
actually
the same
using
now.
like mannequins or whatever.
Yeah, well, they're doing it in football as well, but you have to be very careful about the images fans submit, because
what, like Adolf?
Like, yeah, or Osama bin Laden, or Harold Shipman, I think one Aussie rules team had. So yeah, not good.
You know, we didn't really talk about this, you know, and I know we've talked about in the previous episodes how with the sort of on ice action and getting to hear the players and all that will add to the experience. But now that word came out today that there's going to be this 5-second delay on the world feed, which I don't know if that's everywhere other than Canada and the US, or if it's the world as a planet, would that mean that they're going to bleep that out? Then I'm like, I'll just pump in fans like they have sort of been doing in some of the different leagues. I don't know.
You do kind of get used to that. Like, I know it's hockey and football are very different, but yeah, having watched a bit of cricket without anything, it is bizarre. So, like, even though I would rather hear the players swearing, I think I'd be okay with some atmospheric background noise.
I still don't understand why the NHL doesn't have like an NHL After Dark type series. Like, I think maybe that's just the Canadian in me, and our market maybe isn't big enough, but you know, I feel that they have an avenue to go and put some of that into a package, put it on one of the pay TV channels or an over-the-top service, a Netflix or what have you.
Well, we talked about the world's largest slumber party at West Edmonton Mall that they could be having in broadcasting as a series, but
yeah, I'm totally into that. Yeah. How long until one of the players is into the pool with a dolphin? Do they still have dolphins at West Edmonton?
Actual dolphins?
I don't think so.
They did like a lot. I mean, it's been a long time since I was at West Edmonton Mall, but they had actually a dolphin. I mean,
no, I don't think so. I think Peter.
What is going
on
over the Rockies? Like, people need to check in on them. There's some strange stuff going on over there, and we just lost all our Alberta listeners.
Anywho. Big episode. Hopefully all of our listeners out there got some good value from PJ. As you know, I said earlier, good having him on. He's always been good to us, and I always enjoy conversations. I make it a habit that a couple times a year, PJ and I'll go grab a coffee, grab a beer, and we'll talk shop. Plus, it's cool because you know we're both fathers and newish. That we can also talk about those adventures, which is equally fun. But what final words of wisdom should we impart on all of our millions and millions of listeners here?
Nothing for me, except for the fact that next week's episode, you guys, will be the last episode before the play-in series take place. Just let that soak in. We are literally less than 2 weeks away now from the NHL play-in series kicking off. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm excited. PJ was great. We love having friends of the show or whatever god tier PJ is on. But just who are smarter than us and just make us sound smarter. So yeah, I enjoyed it from that perspective. I definitely feel enriched.
If any of our listeners there have an idea of what we need to call, you know, the likes of the PJs, you know, I think we need a term. Let us know in Discord. Drop into Gate 16. If you're not already in Discord, it's discord.io/C4podcast. The easiest way to go and join in. But let us know your thoughts. As for me, final words of wisdom. I am still wondering who will be on the podcast first, Bo Horvat or Adam Ovenel Carter. And I don't know. I'm putting money on Bo here. Maybe not a lot of money.
Totally possible, honestly.
I mean, you get the Bo Horvat updates from C4 and C4 only. High quality content from us.
Mm-hmm.
But for those of you who are listening, if you haven't already done so, you want to follow us on social media. We're at twitter.com/the C4podcast, facebook.com/C4podcast. As I already mentioned, join our Discord, get in the conversation that happens each and every day with phenomenal listeners of our show. Also, I should call to attention, Nexus and Bearded Canuck actually agreed on something which really shook things up. I felt a little uneasy when that occurred, but that's that type of conversation that can take place, and it's now podcast lore. Those two, going back and forth. But discord.io/C4 podcast is how you get into the action. If you're looking for us online, it's c4podcast.com. I'll forward you to all of our episodes, but you're probably also listening to your favorite podcast app. So if you have not done so already, click subscribe wherever you happen to listen to your podcast, or use the Full Press Coverage Network app where you can find us as well as a lot of other sports-related podcasts. So on behalf of Matt Lee at @Matt Lee_61 and a Forsyth at A403, the still unfit to podcast Abano Carter at Adam FOC and myself, Chris at Lightforce, let's sign this episode off with those magical words. We out.